Andor. Is it a typo? Are they retconning the land of those beloved Ewoks? Do we call them Awoks now? Welcome to Rants and Raves. We watched Andor episodes 1 and 2 and 3, so you don't have to. This is my name is Matt, and I'm here with Jimmy and with Clyde.
Hey.
Hey, guys.
Hey. Man.
Okay. So are we starting with me? I kind of want to go first.
So we should probably have a little brief synopsis of what the
I've got thoughts.
Show is about. Okay, well, Andor is this newest Star Wars story released on Disney Plus, which sits between the events of Episode 3 and Rogue One. In this story, we get to see the beginnings of the rebellion against the Empire. All right, Clyde, tell me what you think.
Okay, so we're starting with the plot. Let me give you my synopsis of the plot.
Okay.
Some guy is looking for a person. Apparently, he owes money to everyone. All the typical tropes from everything. Half the dialogue in the show is presented in a fake language with no subtitles.
Oh, but that's true. It's jumping all over the place. That's true. The story is a little mirandering.
That's basically everything I got out of the first episode or the first 3 episodes. Or I dropped off after 2, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. So the thing about this episode about the show is that it is very mirandering. It is very difficult to follow. It is very jumbled, and there's a lot of people lying for strange reasons, and there's an awful lot of strange it doesn't feel right for a show. It feels like this is not a Star Wars movie, Star Wars related thing actually at all when you start. So
yeah, my take on that, I mean, yeah, it is I think Clyde's right, it is a slow start, right? They make a pretty good effort to try to give you a backstory, getting you introduced to the main characters and all the intricacies around his life. How did he get to where he's at? So there was a lot of that, especially in the first couple of episodes, right? So, I agree with Clyde. It was a little slow in the first couple of episodes.
Just a little. It was very slow. It was actually pretty bad, if you ask me. It was not very watchable.
Yeah. Matt, did you have another thought on the plot writing before we move on to characters?
So since this is trying to explore that space between episode 3 and a Rogue One, there is actually a lot of things that could be discussed here. And one of the things, obviously, is what has been happening with what ends up being the rebellion, which is what this is going to be talking about. But at the same time, we know that there's probably a lot of other interesting things that could happen, which hopefully this series explores. But what we get out of the first few episodes is a lot of cops and people doing jobs, and it doesn't feel substantial in any way.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to characters, that pretty much sums it up. Bottom line, I don't know who anyone is, nor why I should care about any of them. And then there's the obvious, obligatory new sassy droid that everything has to have. And then also in episode 2, some random old guy shows up and then just like sits around. And no clue why, or no desire to stick around long enough to find out why or who he is.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you have seen Rogue One, you would recognize Cassian Andor as our main character.
I've seen Rogue One. I have no clue who this guy is.
well, remember the beginning of that movie? He's not afraid to take somebody's life in cold blood. And we're reminded of the fact that he had to do that right at the beginning of this episode. And maybe this series helps explain why he is this way. So,
yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that too. I mean, besides the main character, Cassian Andor, right? You don't really, I mean, all the other characters are just kind of, part of his storyline, and you're kind of getting introduced to those. So yeah, apart from the main character, I don't recognize any of the others. Keep in mind, I've not really read the books or anything. I've just kind of followed the movies and other Star Wars shows over the years. Um, but um, but it's kind of, I am finding it a little bit interesting because the one thing I notice is that in the movie Rogue One, right, he is a pilot, right, and at least on the first 3 episodes, you don't see that he's really a pilot yet, right? It's like he's yet to become one.
Well, you
So
saw him
I'm
flying. He flew in the first episode. He flew to get to that city and then flew back. That's why he got caught changing out the board because he had used it the night before. And then,
mm,
so you see him flying.
Yeah, well, maybe so, right? But I mean, but part the whole premise for Rogue One is they needed like a pilot to fly
Mm-hmm.
in and do this mission and that kind of thing. But yeah, you're not really seeing his skills as a pilot yet in the first 3. I'm thinking that maybe you get a little bit more insight of that as you go through the story, but I don't know yet, right? Just 3 episodes is all I've watched of this series so far.
Okay.
But yeah, I kind of agree with you, Clyde, there that the characters, there's a lot of characters that's in his storyline that we're getting introduced to, and we're trying to make sense. Like, okay, every new character that comes in the scene and say, okay, what's the significance of this character? And not and for me, it wasn't until the 3rd episode that there was one other seems to be a significant character, Luthen, right? The Luthen character was the one that kind of introduces him to the rebellion and kind of starts to persuade him to come join the rebellion, right? So that's the only other character to me that seems to be any character of significance. I mean, there were some other characters. I mean, there was one that um, the name of the was it Canary was the planet that he's from.
Canary.
Am I remembering that right? Was
Canara.
it planet?
Yeah, I don't know.
Canary.
Yeah, whatever.
I think
Canary.
it's good.
I think
I believe it's Canary.
Canary, right? Canary was the planet he was from. So you do get a little bit of the lady who found him there as a boy, right, on the Canary planet. You get a little bit of background on her. She's a little bit interesting, but but they don't show enough of her really to get all that interested, other than the fact that it kind of gives you a bit more detail as to why he's there now at this particular time where we're at in the series, right? But yeah, the Luthen character seems like he might be significant. He was certainly significant in episode 3. I'm thinking he'll probably continue to be significant at least for a couple of more episodes, if not throughout the whole series, right?
All right. Well, production quality. I think the show looks fine, but the opening set, it looked way too advanced to be Star Wars. It looked more like Blade Runner, or what was that Netflix show about the skin suits? Everything was too fancy. Later in the show, you see the old Apple IIe-esque computers and everything's dirty. That looks more Star Wars, but that first city looked like he ended up in New Tokyo or whatever. And the other thing that just absolutely drove me nuts was the audio production, especially at the end. I think it was episode 2. The song at the end of episode 2. whoever mixed that needs to be fired, because the
Mm.
drums were so freaking loud, and which wouldn't necessarily be so bad if they were actually in time with the rest of the music. So it was just absolute, it was terrible. And I don't, how that made it past is just, it's sad.
So I thought that, as usual, Star Wars was able to make one of my favorite characters a droid. I don't know why I like the droids from Star Wars, but I tend to. They are almost always some extreme of some kind. And in this time, they've made a new droid for me to fall in love with. This is the new droid, the stuttering B2 EMO. He has a hard time lying. It takes extra power for him to lie, which is hilarious. In addition, the various sets and backgrounds do look great, in my opinion. Yes, I agree. The Camino looking planet, and I say that because that's the one that was raining and looked very futuristic in the original, in the prequel trilogy. That's what it reminded me of. It was not that planet, but that's what it did remind me of. But they are beautiful and gorgeous. If you'll find yourself immersed back into the world of the Star Wars universe. So, absolutely, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I thought the production quality was good. Definitely a Star Wars show. I mean, there's no mistaking it for that, right? At least for me. I mean, it was kind of on par with some of the other Star Wars shows. You know, I think maybe if you go back to the original Star Wars movie, right? I mean, that was made in 1977. So trying to maybe match, where how things look back then, as opposed to how things are now.
But they've
maybe
done that very well in every other movie, and every other TV show has fit that style sheet. That very first city does not fit the Star Wars style sheet, which was my complaint.
Oh, the very first in the first episode.
Yeah, in the very first episode, when the show opens up, everything else looked fine. It was what I expect from Star Wars. It was that very first when he goes to the bar.
Okay, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, I do think. Yeah, I get the Blade Runner reference there, at least in that first scene of the first.
That was the neon in the wet, like San Francisco streets.
I get that reference, and I think I might agree with that vibe, especially in that scene, right? But once you get past that, right? Then it kind of settles into a traditional Star Wars show.
I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they just used a pre-existing set to get the opening film so they could pitch it to Disney, and then they went, we'll just use it.
Yeah. I mean, save on budget. That might have been in place where they saved a little bit on budget.
Yeah.
I think they were going for a certain aesthetic, and they reached for it, and they thought they hit it, and obviously for you guys, they didn't feel right. So it's okay.
But I mean, if you're saying that it's reminiscent of another planet that is, I don't know the prequels. I saw episode 1 and I was out. So yeah, that might be part of it.
There are places in Star Wars where it does look super futuristic, and it does look like neon lights and things like that. And this one felt a little back alley-ish, and that's everything was gray and blue in that place, and rainy. So absolutely, it was a little definitely a little like being in your Blade Runner show. So I get that.
It definitely wasn't a desert planet. That's for sure.
I wouldn't have questioned it if it was on another planet. They had it set like on the other side of the checkpoint on the same planet that is dirty and dusty and desert, and it's starkly different. But I don't know.
They don't actually explicitly say it, but it is on a different planet.
Oh, okay. Then add that to the story problem, because I had no way of understanding that.
There was much
There's
confusion
no context
about that. Trust me, there is much confusion about that.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to likes. My like. I don't have to watch anymore.
That's true, because you've done what you need to do your
I seriously tried to watch all three, but after the end of after 2, I was like, I'm done. I have no interest. Sorry.
Sadly, you actually missed out where episode 3 actually became an actually halfway decent Star Wars episode. Before that, I agree. Episode 1 and 2 were fairly dreadful. But I can say things I liked about this was that so far, haven't seen a single lightsaber, not even a reference to the Jedis or the Force. Not that would be a bad thing. It's just that most Star Wars stories are about that kind of thing.
Well, actually, many of the Star Wars stories aren't. Because
not
like
on TV and film.
Yeah, because like the Mandalorian, nobody knows what a Jedi is.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's got that in there. So
I guess the Gus Fring did have a blade, like a vibro blade or something like that.
No, if they're in the Mandalorian, you have it is tied into the Jedi lore very deeply.
It is, but none of those people, you don't see any. The only thing you ever see is when the child does some random weird magic as what people
you've only watched the first season?
I've watched both seasons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's because but that's a different discussion.
There's well, I mean, in terms of not seeing a lightsaber, right? I don't think there was one in Rogue One either.
Yeah,
right.
Or but there wasn't one in Solo. And that's my point. Is it's not out of place to have a Star Wars property with no lightsaber.
True,
but you did have the laser blasters, right? Those are in there. Right.
It's gotta, yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm just saying I'm happy that that's not the focus of the story, because it is awfully easy for them to fall into that focus, and that's great because I do like those stories. Absolutely. I'm also happy to not have those stories. I want to have some other stuff too. So I'm good with this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for me, the lights were, and Matt pretty much said it, right? Episode 3, right? Episode 3 was the big light for me. I mean, to me, that's almost like the first 2 episodes were really more just kind of, giving you a backstory, filling in some detail about, the main character storyline, how he got there, right? That kind of thing, all this kind of thing that's maybe less interesting, but maybe the nerds of Star Wars out there are curious to know, the answers to those questions, right? So I think episode 1 and 2 was answering, okay, how did he come to be? How did he get to where he's at, right? And this kind of thing. Probably some things that some references from Rogue One in there that I can't remember. I'd have to go back and watch Rogue One again to maybe get some of those references. But the first 2 episodes, as we've been saying, definitely slow. Clyde's right on that. But episode 3 is where it really starts to get interesting then, right? And you start seeing where he is, railing against the Empire. And then there's the Luthen character that I spoke of earlier. He enters the series and is interested in talking to Andor about joining the rebellion, right? And for me, that's where the real story of this series begins, is episode 3.
Okay, so then that would bring us to dislikes. My dislikes are, as you could probably guess, pretty much everything.
Aw.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I've never really felt appealing with having any appealing feelings with Cassian Andor. From the watching of Rogue One, even, I never liked his character. He just felt cold and not calculating and like overthinking, but calculating like, how can I get out of this situation? I'm not about to do anything I don't need to. He's always about what's best for him versus what's best for anybody else. And I'm hoping that this series actually tries to get into what works for everybody else. But to him, especially in this beginning of the series, all I saw him is like he's really good at lying, getting himself out of things he's into, and not appealing at all. So I'm still not a huge fan of Cassian. I'm hoping that maybe the series would make me like him more, but as of this is not enough information for me to like him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just comment on your dislike there, Matt. Yeah, I mean, the Cassian character, even in Rogue One, I mean, to me, he was kind of like the pilot, right? He was the one that was going to help, get them to the planet there, right? To steal the information, right? That kind of thing. So he was just kind of a just a cog in the wheel, right? So to speak, type of character. And now, they're going to, now we're going into a series that's going to, tell his whole storyline, how he got to be there in Rogue One. And, he was a cog in the wheel, but, that whole episode of Rogue One, right, was a very important part of the greater story, right? So so apparently the Star Wars nerds wanted more detail and all, and so that's that's the reason why we're watching this series now, right? But for dislikes for me, is it's quite obvious, just the slowness of episodes 1 and 2, right? I mean, that was I mean, I get it why they had those episodes. I get the purpose for those episodes, right? For the Star Wars, and those 2 episodes was, in my opinion, primarily for the Star Wars nerds, right? They want their questions answered, as all the intricate details of the main character, Cassian Andor, right? For guys like myself who enjoys the Star Wars movies, right, and even a lot of the shows too, such as Mandalorian, right? I do care about that, right? But I think that could have been done in just 1 episode rather than 2 episodes, right? So I thought it was a little bit long to stretch it out into 2 episodes that could have all been done in just 1, right?
Agreed.
So that would be my dislike, right? Is that just a little too long on getting the backstory and the intricate details of the main character.
There was a lot of standing around and trivial dialogue that totally could have been cut out.
Yeah,
to make 1 episode. All right, so value. I really can't complain about the value, because I clicked the Disney Plus add-on to my Hulu account, and since which is an additional $2 just for, but it was because of, I don't know, there was whatever reason I could get it for $2. But it was so late in the month that it prorated to 63 cents. I watched these 2 episodes and I immediately canceled Disney Plus, because there was literally nothing on Disney Plus that I wanted to watch. So it cost me 63 cents to watch these 2 movies. I guess it's a good value.
Well, you're right. If you are already a Disney Plus subscriber, it makes perfect sense for you to give this a shot, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. It's not going to cost you anything extra. That's the good news of it being "quote unquote" free with your existing subscription. Otherwise, yeah, I understand how you feel, Clyde.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Me on value, I mean, I think it's worth watching, right? Had it not been for episode 3, I might would have had a different opinion there. But episode 3 is what brought me around, right? I was like, and to be honest, right, I watched the first 2 episodes and it was really slow. So I didn't immediately watch the third episode. I waited a couple of nights before jumping in on the third episode. And so finally I was like, okay, there's one more episode there. Let me watch this. And I turned it on and it's like, oh, okay, now we're talking, right? Now we got a show here. Now it's getting interesting. So so if you can make it through the first couple of episodes and get to episode 3, then I think that's where you start to find the value, and you're like, oh, okay, this is worth watching. So,
All right. Well, do we recommend this? That is
The
the
question
question.
is, would you recommend this, Clyde?
I've come to decide that I'm not qualified.
Hmm.
I don't have an attachment to Star Wars. The Star Wars properties that I like seem to be hated. Like Solo was, in my opinion, the best Star Wars anything ever. Yeah, so I don't think I'm qualified to say if it's good or bad. I can definitely say it's not for me.
Fair
And
enough.
I would not recommend my past self watch it.
Well, I think that if you are a Star Wars mega fan and you would like to do things like know exactly how the rebellion was born, this actually would be probably a good series to watch, because it does appear to be getting into those pieces of information. It does appear to be providing a good backstory of what leads up into the rebellion actually on various planets. So I think this could be good if this is what you're into this thing. Otherwise, thus far it's mediocre TV.
yeah. So here's what I'd say, right? And I'll comment further once I say this, right? If you're a Star Wars fan or a science fiction fan, it's a no-brainer, right? You'll like it if you're either one of those, right?
A point of order. I am
What's that?
I am a big sci-fi fan. I
Mhm.
didn't like this.
Okay. All right. But I've enjoyed all of the Star Wars shows, the movies, all the series that I've seen so far. All of them are good in my opinion. It's just that some I liked a little bit more than others. And I'm kind of with Clyde, right? I really enjoyed Solo, although a lot of people, including the big mega Star Wars fans, didn't care for it all that much. And I thought it was great, right? I thought it was a really good backstory on Han Solo. But matter of fact, I would like to see another one of those, just to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But this one here, I will say, if you aggregate all the Star Wars movies and shows all together, right? I will say this, and I'm judging this based on 3 episodes, right? I will say this is one of the weaker ones, right? So if you're not really a Star Wars fan all that much, right? And certainly if you're not a science fiction fan, then I'd say, yeah, you probably want to pass on it and move on to something else, right? But if you are a Star Wars fan, and you like most science fiction, right, then I'd say give it a shot, especially if you're a Star Wars fan, right? You're going to enjoy it and find it interesting, especially once you get to the 3rd episode, as I did, if you're a Star Wars fan. So with that caveat, right, I would say I'd recommend it if you are truly a Star Wars fan.
All right. Well, that's what we think. So ultimately, the final decision is up to you. Also up to you is liking and subscribing this channel. It's absolutely free and will help us immensely. Also, if you'd like to support this channel, click the link down in the video description and become a patron. See you next time.